September 15th, 1944. Somewhere over Germany. My dearest Helen, I'm going to tell you about the day I counted to 600. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. That's how I flew home. That's how I landed, counting seconds like a child playing hide and seek. Except I wasn't playing. I was falling from 10,000 feet with no instruments, no altimeter, no airspeed indicator, no compass, no artificial horizon. Nothing. Just me, a P-51 Mustang, and the only thing I had left. Time. Flak hit my cockpit over Leipzig, destroyed every instrument, the entire panel, shattered glass, twisted metal, sparking wires. I couldn't see my altitude, couldn't measure my speed, couldn't determine my heading. But I knew 3 things. I was at 10,000 feet when instruments died. I was 30 miles from base, and I had been taught that a P-51 descends approximately 17 feet per second in a controlled glide. Simple mathematics. 10,000 feet divided by 17 feet per second equals 588 seconds to ground level. I started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. For 10 minutes, I counted every single second. Couldn't stop, couldn't lose track. Because if I miscounted, if I thought I was at 2,000 feet when I was actually at 200, I'd fly straight into the ground. 600 seconds later, I touched down on the runway. Perfect landing. Because American flight training taught me more than procedures. It taught me to think, to calculate, to trust mathematics when everything else fails. Portland, Oregon. November 2024. Sarah Mitchell, granddaughter of Captain David Mitchell, USAAF, sat in her grandmother Helen's attic on a cold Saturday morning. Rain drummed steadily on the roof. The attic smelled of old wood and memories. Grandma Helen had passed 3 months ago at 102. Lived independently until the end. Sharp mind, clear memories. But she'd never talked much about the war. Those were your grandfather's stories, she'd say. And he's gone now. Grandpa David died in 1998. Sarah was only 8. She remembered him vaguely, white hair, gentle smile, patient teacher. He taught her to count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, making it a game. Now, sorting through boxes after Grandma's funeral, Sarah found something. A small cedar box, beautifully preserved. A brass plate on top engraved, Helen's letters, private. Sarah hesitated. These were Grandma's private things. But the family had agreed. Sort everything. Preserve what matters. Let the rest go. She opened the box. Letters, dozens of them. Thin wartime paper. Careful handwriting. All addressed, "My dearest Helen," in faded ink. She pulled out the top letter. Postmarked September 20th, 1944. V-mail format. Censored and approved. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. I'm going to tell you about the day I counted to 600. Sarah sat on the dusty attic floor, rain drumming above, and began reading her grandfather's words from 80 years ago. My dearest Helen, let me start from the beginning. So you understand how I got there. How I ended up counting seconds like a child while flying a fighter plane home alone. I need to tell this while it's fresh. While the fear and the mathematics and the absolute concentration are still vivid. Before time smooths the edges and makes it seem easier than it was. September 15th, 1944. Dawn briefing, 0530 hours. Mission, bomber escort, 36 P-51 Mustangs from our group escorting B-17S hitting industrial targets in Leipzig. Deep penetration, 6-hour round trip. Expected fighter opposition, heavy flak over target, standard mission. I'd flown 42 before this one. Knew the routine, knew the risks, knew how to manage fear and focus on the job. We took off at 0630, formed up, climbed to altitude, met the bombers at the rendezvous point, took positions around the formation, high cover, low cover, flanking positions. Flying protective pattern. The bomber pilots called us little friends. We called them the big birds. They carried the bombs. We kept the enemy fighters away. Partnership, trust. I was flying P-51D Helen's Hope, named after you, of course. Tail number 473, my aircraft, my responsibility. We'd flown together for 8 months. I knew every sound she made, every vibration, every handling characteristic. The flight to Leipzig was uneventful. Some scattered clouds, good visibility, no enemy fighters initially. The Germans were learning to avoid our escorts, wait for us to turn back when fuel ran low, then hit the bombers when they were alone. But we had drop tanks now, extended range. We could escort all the way to target and back. The Germans hadn't fully adapted to that yet. Still thought we'd turn back earlier. We didn't. Over Leipzig at 1100 hours, the bombers began their run. We climbed to 18,000 feet, high cover position, watched for enemy fighters diving from above, and they came, Focke-Wulf 19s, maybe 15 of them, diving fast from 25,000 feet, trying to hit the bombers before we could intercept. We turned into them, 4 of us, climbing hard, using altitude and speed, classic intercept. I got on one's tail, FW190, good pilot. He saw me, broke hard right. I followed, stayed with him, waited for the shot. Got tone, fired, saw strikes on his wing route, smoke. He rolled away, damaged, didn't wait to confirm. My job was protecting bombers, not scoring kills. Turned back to the formation. The other FW-19s were breaking off. We'd disrupted their attack. The bombers were still in formation, still on target, still dropping bombs. Mission successful. Time to go home. We descended back to 10,000 feet. Escort altitude for return flight. Fuel good. All aircraft accounted for. Heading west. That's when I made my mistake. I was checking my instruments. Normal procedure. Altimeter, 10,000 feet exact. Airspeed, 280 miles per hour. Compass, heading 270 due west. Fuel, good. Engine temps, normal. Everything perfect. I glanced back at the bomber formation, counted them. All present, still in formation. Good. Glanced forward again, and in that 2-second moment when my eyes were away from the front, the flak battery fired. Helen? I never saw the burst, never saw the guns, never had warning. One moment, normal flight. Next moment, the entire world exploded. The concussion hit first, felt like flying into a wall. Aircraft shuddered violently. I heard metal tearing, heard glass shattering, heard electrical sparking, saw my instrument panel explode. Not figuratively, literally explode. Shrapnel had hit the electrical junction behind the panel. The power surge blew out every instrument simultaneously. The altimeter, glass shattered, needle spinning wildly as internal mechanism destroyed. The airspeed indicator, dial face blown out, showing nothing. The compass, cracked, filled with fluid leaking down the panel. The artificial horizon, black, dead, no gyro power. The turn coordinator, frozen, no electrical power. The vertical speed indicator, destroyed, face peeled back like a tin can. The engine gauges, half dead, half showing impossible readings. The radio, smoking, completely dead. My entire instrument panel, my window into the aircraft's status, my connection to the world, was gone, destroyed in one instant. I sat there for 3 seconds, staring at the wreckage, mind blank, not processing, not understanding, just staring. Then the training kicked in. Assessment, aircraft still flying, engine running, controls responsive. I wasn't hit, just the instruments. I checked myself, no injuries, no blood, canopy intact. I could see outside, could breathe, could fly. But I had no instruments, no way to measure altitude, speed, direction, or attitude. Flying completely blind in every technical sense. My first thought, Bail out. Abandon aircraft. Parachute down. Standard procedure for catastrophic instrument failure. My second thought, I'm over Leipzig. Enemy territory. Bailing out means POW camp. Means not seeing you for years. Means sitting out the war. My third thought, the aircraft is flyable. Engine good. Controls good. Fuel probably good. And I'm only 30 miles from base. That's 10 minutes of flying. Could I fly 10 minutes with no instruments? Most pilots would say no. Impossible. Too dangerous. But I remembered something Captain Hayes had taught me. Portland Attic, November 2024. Sarah stopped reading. Her heart was pounding. She could feel the fear in her grandfather's words, the explosion, the instant when everything failed. She'd never known, never imagined. Grandpa David had been that quiet man teaching her to count in the backyard, not this young pilot facing death over Germany. She kept reading, hands shaking. March 1943. Maxwell Field, Alabama. Advanced flight training. I was learning P-51 systems, emergency procedures. What to do when things go wrong. My instructor was Captain Robert Hayes, 35 years old, veteran pilot. Had flown P-40s in North Africa before becoming an instructor. Knew combat, knew survival. He was tough, demanding, made us repeat procedures until they were automatic. In combat, you won't have time to think, he'd say. You need automatic responses. But he also taught us to think, to understand why procedures work, to prepare for scenarios that don't have procedures. One afternoon after a training flight, he pulled me aside. Mitchell, sit down. I want to teach you something that's not in any manual. I sat, curious. You've learned all the emergency procedures, engine failure, electrical failure, hydraulic failure, all good. But what if you lose everything? What if all your instruments fail simultaneously? Sir, the manual says bail out if instrument failure is complete. The manual says that because most pilots can't fly without instruments, but you can if you understand one principle. He pulled out a notepad, drew a P-51 in descent, a Mustang in a controlled glide, partial power, clean configuration, normal descent angle, descends at approximately 17 feet per second. That's 1,020 feet per minute. It's consistent, reliable, repeatable. He looked at me. If you know your starting altitude, you can track your descent by counting seconds. 1 second equals 17 feet. 10 seconds equals 170 feet. 1 minute equals 1,020 feet. I understood the mathematics, but not the application. Sir, when would I need this? Probably never. But if you ever lose all instruments and can't bail out, enemy territory, injured, whatever, you can still navigate by counting. It's a cognitive tool. Can't be destroyed. Can't fail unless you lose consciousness. He tapped the notepad. 17 feet per second. Remember that number. It could save your life someday. I filed it away. Interesting concept. Probably never need it. September 15th, 1944, at 10,000 feet over Leipzig with no instruments, I needed it. Captain Hayes' voice was clear in my mind. 17 feet per second. I had information, starting altitude, 10,000 feet. I'd checked my altimeter seconds before the hit. That was certain. Descent rate, 17 feet per second if I maintained controlled descent. That was the constant. Distance to base, approximately 30 miles west. I could see the sun, could maintain heading. Time calculation, 10,000 feet divided by 17 feet per second equals 588.2 seconds. Call it 588 seconds. That's 9 minutes and 48 seconds until ground level. The mathematics was simple. The execution was terrifying. I had to count every second for nearly 10 minutes. Couldn't lose track, couldn't skip, couldn't miscount. Because if I thought I was at 2,000 feet when I was actually at 200 feet, I'd have less than 1 second before hitting the ground at 180 miles per hour. No time to react, no time to pull up. Just death. I keyed the radio. Dead. No communication with anyone. I looked for the other P-51s in my flight. They were ahead. Hadn't noticed my problem. Continuing west, I was alone. I could waggle my wings, try to get attention, signal distress. But what would they do? They couldn't help, couldn't give me instruments, could only watch me bail out or try to land. And if I was trying to land, I needed absolute concentration, no distractions. I was alone, and that was fine. This was between me, the aircraft, and mathematics. I took a deep breath, set my throttle to descent power, felt the aircraft settle into a glide, trimmed for hands-off stability, checked the sun position, due west, maintained heading by keeping sun on my left side. It was late morning, sun south of east. Everything set. Time to begin. I started counting. 1. Helen, I need you to understand what counting to 588 means. Try it right now. Count to 60, 1 minute. Easy, right? Now imagine counting to 588. Nearly 10 minutes, every single number. No skipping, no losing track, no getting distracted. Now imagine your life depends on perfect accuracy. Miss one number and you might die. That was my situation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each number deliberate, each second measured, trying to maintain perfect rhythm, not too fast, not too slow. Exactly 1 second between numbers. At first, it felt manageable, counting to 20, to 50. I could do this. But then my mind started questioning. At 60 seconds, I was at 8,980 feet. If my count was accurate. But was it accurate? Had I counted too fast? Too slow? Had I accidentally skipped from 47 to 49? I didn't know. Couldn't verify. Just had to trust. The doubt was crushing. What if you're wrong? What if you've already lost count? What if you're at 9,200 feet and about to overshoot the base? Or at 8,700 feet and about to undershoot? I forced the doubt away. Trust the count. Trust the training. Keep counting. 61, 62, 63. At 100 seconds, I was at 8,300 feet. My body started giving me information, subtle, almost imperceptible. But there, the air pressure on my face felt slightly different, denser. The sound of wind past the canopy changed pitch slightly. The engine note changed, barely noticeable, but there. I used this feedback. Does this feel like 8,300 feet? Or does it feel higher? Lower? It felt approximately right. Maybe. Hard to tell with such subtle changes. But the feedback gave me confidence. I was descending. The count seemed to match reality. Keep counting. 101, 102, 103. At 150 seconds, I was at 7,450 feet. A new fear emerged. What if I lose focus? What if I get distracted and lose count? My mind wanted to wander, wanted to think about other things, about you, about home, about what would happen if this didn't work. I couldn't let it wander, had to maintain absolute focus. The count was everything. 151, 152, 153. I developed a rhythm, like a metronome. Internalized the beat. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. 170, 171, 172. At 200 seconds, I was at 6,600 feet. The physical sensations were clearer now. The air definitely felt denser. The controls felt slightly heavier, more air resistance. The engine sounded different, lower pitch in the thicker air. I used these checkpoints. 200 seconds should be 6,600 feet. Does this feel like 6,600 feet? Yes, approximately. The sensory feedback matched the mathematics. That was reassuring. My internal clock was working. My count was accurate. But the validation also brought new fear. You're 1/3 through. You've been accurate so far. But can you maintain it for 6 more minutes? Keep counting. 201, 202, 203. At 250 seconds, something unexpected happened. A thought intruded. Wait, was that 249 or 250? Did I just count 250 twice? Panic spike. Had I miscounted? Was I off now? Should I go back, recount? No. Can't second guess? Trust the first count. Keep moving forward. 251, 252. But the doubt lingered. What if you did miscount? What if you're now off by 1, by 5? Can't think about it. Trust the count. Trust the rhythm. Keep going. 260, 270, 280. At 300 seconds, I was at 4,900 feet. Halfway. 5 minutes down. 5 minutes to go. The air was noticeably thicker now. The controls felt heavy. The engine sound was distinctly lower. Everything confirmed. I'm descending. But was I at 4,900 feet, or 5,500, or 4,200? I looked at the horizon, tried to judge altitude visually. But without instruments, without reference points, it was impossible. Could be 5,000 feet, could be 3,000. I had to trust the count. 301, 302, 303. The rhythm was solid now, internalized. My mind had found the beat. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 350, 360, 370. At 400 seconds, I was at 3,200 feet. This was dangerous territory. At this altitude, errors become instantly fatal. If I was actually at 1,200 feet but thought I was at 3,200, I had maybe 30 seconds before impact. No time to correct, no time to react. The fear was intense now, physical. I could feel my heart pounding, feel sweat despite the cold, feel the weight of consequence. Every second mattered. Every count had to be perfect. 401, 402, 403. I forced myself to breathe steadily. Control the fear. Use it for focus, not panic. 420, 430, 440. The ground had to be visible soon. Had to see features, trees, roads, buildings. 450, 460, 470. At 500 seconds, I was at 1,500 feet. Pattern altitude. This is where I'd normally be entering landing pattern, where I'd be looking for the runway, setting up for approach. I looked ahead, scanned the horizon, searched for the base, and there, far ahead but visible, I saw it. The airfield, the runway, exactly where it should be if my heading was correct and my distance estimate was accurate. Relief flooded through me. I wasn't lost, wasn't off course. The mathematics was working. But I wasn't safe yet. I was at 1,500 feet if my count was right. That meant 88 more seconds until ground level, 88 seconds to find the runway precisely and line up for landing. Keep counting. 501, 502, 503. At 520 seconds, I could see the runway clearly, but was I lined up? Was I at the right angle, the right distance? Without instruments, I was flying entirely by sight, picture, and feel, judging height by how things looked, judging speed by how fast the ground appeared to be moving. 530, 540, 550, getting close. The ground was rushing up now, features becoming clear. Trees, buildings, runway markings, 560, 570, 580. This was it. 8 seconds to ground level. I should be almost touching down. I felt for the runway. Reduced power. Flared. Used sight picture to judge height. 585, 6, 7, 8. Wheels touched. Perfect. I rolled out on the runway. Still couldn't believe it. Counted to 588. descended 10,000 feet by mathematics, landed blind. I taxied to the ramp using visual reference only, shut down the engine, sat in the cockpit shaking, not from fear anymore, from the realization of what had just happened, of how close I'd come to dying, of how mathematics and training and focus had saved my life. Ground crew ran up, saw my destroyed instrument panel. "Sir, how did you land? You have no instruments." "Counted seconds, 17 feet per second, 588 seconds from 10,000 feet. They stared at me like I was insane. The crew chief climbed up, looked at the panel. "Every single instrument is destroyed. You couldn't see anything." "Didn't need to see instruments, needed to count." "And you counted accurately for 10 minutes while flying alone with no verification?" "Had to. Miscounting meant death." They helped me out of the cockpit. My legs were shaking, adrenaline wearing off, reality setting in. I'd survived. Against impossible odds, with no equipment, just counting. The squadron commander, Major Thompson, came over. He'd heard on the radio. My radio was dead, but others had reported my condition. "Mitchell, I heard you flew 30 miles and landed with no instruments." "How?" I explained. The flak hit. The destroyed panel. Captain Hayes' training, the mathematics, the counting. He listened quietly, then said, "That's the finest piece of airmanship I've heard of. You trusted training and mathematics over panic. That's what American pilots do." He paused. "I'm recommending you for a commendation, and I'm having your technique documented. Other pilots need to know this is possible." Later that day, Captain Hayes found me. He was visiting the base, heard about my landing. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the destroyed instrument panel in my aircraft. Then he turned to me. 17 feet per second?" "Yes, sir. Exactly like you taught me." He nodded slowly. "That's why we teach beyond the manual. That's why we prepare for impossible scenarios. Because sometimes the impossible happens." He shook my hand. His grip was firm. "You did well, Mitchell. Very well." That handshake meant more than any medal. That was my instructor validating that I'd learned, that I'd survived because American training works. Portland Attic, November 2024. Afternoon. Sarah finished the letter. Tears were streaming down her face. She'd been reading for an hour, completely absorbed. Her grandfather, the quiet man who'd taught her to count, who'd made it a game. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. It wasn't a game. It was survival. It was mathematics. It was his life counting on precision. She suddenly remembered something, a moment when she was 8, playing hide and seek in the backyard. Grandpa David was counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. He'd counted all the way to 100. Perfectly, never losing track. She'd been amazed. "How do you count so well, Grandpa?" He'd smiled. "Practice, sweetheart. Lots of practice. Counting saved my life once." She hadn't understood. Thought he was joking. He wasn't joking. He'd counted to 588 to survive. And decades later, he was still practicing, still counting, still remembering the day that mathematics saved his life. Sarah looked at the letter. 80 years old, written by a 24-year-old fighter pilot. Her grandfather, young, terrified, counting seconds because American training had given him the tool he needed. She wiped her eyes, pulled out her phone, called her brother. "Tom, you need to come over. Now. I found Grandpa's war letters." "Can it wait? No, it can't wait. You need to read these. Need to understand who Grandpa was, what he did." Silence. Then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sarah hung up, looked at the cedar box. Dozens more letters, dozens more stories. This wasn't just family history. This was American history. This was proof that training matters, that mathematics matters, that teaching people to think, not just follow procedures, saves lives. She carefully placed the letter back in the box, but she photographed it first. This story needed to be preserved, shared, remembered, because somewhere, right now, someone is learning to fly, learning mathematics, learning principles, and someday those principles might save their life. Just like they saved Captain David Mitchell on September 15, 1944, when he counted to 588 and came home. Helen, I'm writing this a week after the mission. The censors have cleared my account. I wanted you to know what happened. Wanted you to understand what I do over here, how I survive, why training matters. And I wanted you to know something else. I'm coming home. I have 8 more missions to complete my tour. Then, I rotate back to the States, back to you. I'll complete those missions. I'll survive, because American training gave me the tools to survive, even when those tools are as simple as counting. 1, 2, 3. You asked in your last letter what keeps me going, what gives me strength to keep flying when it's dangerous, when friends don't come back, when fear is constant. Here's the answer. You. Knowing you're waiting. Knowing I have a life to return to. Knowing that counting to 588 brings me one step closer to counting the days until I see you again. And also, pride in what we do. Pride in American training and education and values. We're not just fighting. We're proving that thinking wins battles, that understanding principles defeats equipment failure, that Americans can improvise and adapt and solve problems nobody anticipated. That's why we'll win this war, not just because we have more planes or better equipment, because we have people who think, who understand, who count to 588 when their lives depend on it. I miss you terribly. Miss your voice, your laugh, your letters that remind me what I'm fighting for. But I wanted you to know. I'm safe. I'm skilled. I'm prepared. American training created that preparation. When I come home, and I will come home, I'm going to teach our children to count carefully, to pay attention, to understand that mathematics isn't abstract, it's practical, it's survival. It's the difference between life and death at 10,000 feet. I love you. I'll see you soon. Your husband? Captain David Mitchell, 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group, United States Army Air Force, PS. Captain Hayes told me something yesterday. He said, Mitchell, you know what makes American pilots different? We don't just train for success. We train for failure. For when everything goes wrong, that's when principles matter. That's when understanding saves lives. He's right. We trained for failure. And when failure happened, when every instrument died, I had the tools to survive. Because American instructors taught me to think, not just follow procedures. PPS. The maintenance crew repaired my aircraft. New instrument panel, new electrical system. She flies perfectly now, but before they replaced the destroyed panel, I asked them to save one piece. The altimeter face, shattered glass, twisted needle. Useless. I'm keeping it. As a reminder of the day when equipment failed but mathematics didn't. When instruments died but counting survived. When American training proved more reliable than American technology. 17 feet per second. 588 seconds. One perfect landing. That's American training at work. Subscribe for more untold stories where American training created impossible survivals, where mathematics replaced sophisticated instruments, where counting seconds saved lives, where principles proved more reliable than equipment, where simple cognitive tools, counting, calculating, trusting mathematics, defeated equipment failure and brought American pilots home safely. This is American training at its finest, teaching people to think, not just follow procedures, teaching principles that work even when everything else fails, teaching tools that can't be destroyed by enemy fire. This is why American education matters. This is why training beyond the manual saves lives. This is why counting to 588, something any child can do, became the difference between life and death for Captain David Mitchell over Germany in 1944.